Remember, the content on our show is for information only.
It is not intended to provide medical or other professional advice.
Hello and welcome to Placebo, the podcast where each week my sister and I try and teach each other something interesting about healthcare or medicine. I'm Logan Richards, and this is my sister.
I'm Kaylin Richards.
And today on Placebo, our current cell phone theme.
Okay. We didn't do enough.
We didn't do enough. No, this isn't actually cell phones like we talked about last week. This is something that I thought was going to be a small little issue, but turned out to be much more complicated than I expected.
Much like I discovered on mine.
Okay, so take out your iPhone.
Have it.
You got it? Okay, turn it on.
Go to the home screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
And swipe up from the bottom so you see all those little menus.
I see it, yeah.
And in those options, there should be a little picture with like a moon and a sun.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I see it.
Click that.
It's got a moon. Yep, I clicked it.
That's like a moon and a sun together, right?
Mine just is a moon.
Let me see. Oh, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one on the bottom. You click Do Not Disturb.
Oh, I was like, why do not disturb? Okay. Yeah, I got it. Clicked it. Moon and sun together.
Does it say anything?
The color palette kind of changed.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's it. So that's what Apple, which of course is the maker of the iPhone, is calling night shift.
Are you buzz marketing?
No, but...
Yeah, it looks kind of greener when I'm looking at it right now.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
So have you ever used that before?
Nope.
Do you know what it's supposed to be doing?
I wonder if it's maybe something to do with how the light from the cell phone, like this is why you're not supposed to watch TV or go on a computer before you go to sleep, because the light is supposed to keep you awake.
You're getting at the root of this episode right now.
Something like that. So this is a different color palette, and maybe that helps. The
point that I'm trying to make here right now is that this idea that artificial light and now even specifically blue light of a certain wavelength that makes the light blue is supposed to be bad for you in one way or another. And I'm trying to demonstrate this by saying that this huge multinational cell phone company has seen fit that they need to make a feature in their phone that's embedded that everyone can turn on whenever they want.
I think I have heard of maybe filters that you can put over your computer screen. That's supposed to change the
this issue got way more, I don't know what the right word is. It kind of mythical than I expected.
I mean, like when I was doing the research for our previous episode about cell phones, I found so many websites of various products people are selling to protect you from the radiation, or various articles people have written sharing their opinion. It's a very controversial topic for a lot of people. Right. So I tried not to talk about that and just really focus on what the research that we have. But, you know.
Okay, I think we're going to find pretty much, although the research that I found seemed to be strong in support of this in general, blue light being bad. Okay. There are a lot of kind of products of that nature that you really wonder whether they help or not. So everything from this Apple thing. And of course, the claims that Apple makes are probably very legally worded.
I'm sure they've thought hard about how to word these things, yeah.
Right. But the idea that Apple puts out is that this night shift feature that's embedded in all of their phones and devices will help you...
Is it in my computer too then, or is it not in computers?
I don't know if it's in your computer, but there are plenty of software applications that you could get that
I've seen those
not
before. Necessarily
the native Apple ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes same for all the Google devices and everything like that. I think, as far as I know, Apple is the only one that has it built into its like native systems. But
you can buy apps
on any electronic device, you can get software that takes out the blue from the LEDs.
So, which is why my phone looks kind of greenish. The picture of my cat that I have on my home screen, she looks a little jaundiced or something.
And what's interesting is that particular software is supposed to use the clock as well as the information that your phone has on when the sun sets and rises and it's supposed to change the color of your device based on what time of the day it is.
So now it's the middle of the day. You would think it would be fine to have blue?
Yeah, so I'm not sure why. It seemed to clearly take out the blues in your lights. So we'll talk about that. I'm not really sure exactly how that works. The only point that I was trying to make with that is that this issue is so pervasive that this technology company of massive scale has made it as essential as a flashlight is on your cell phone, or as essential as anything else.
It's right next to the calculator and the flashlight button and the camera button. I've never used this one though. So.
Well, see, so they've put it in this category of like essential phone like tools now. Like everyone assumes that everyone. I don't know how anyone got by without the flashlight feature of their phone. So, anyways,
do they carry flashlights around all the time?
I don't know. It's just like they couldn't see anything. I use my flashlight every day, it seems like.
Every day. It's handy feature.
Okay, so let's get started on this. There turned out to be, when I first started researching, because I was just interested, like why do cell phones have this feature? Like why is this a thing? I actually had kind of a hard time finding research on this. Like I was typing in things like blue light and cell phones, and all I was getting was these websites that you mentioned earlier where it's like, well, okay, these are someone's opinions. I'm not sure if they looked at the research or not, and they're not making it clear that they have. So
right, if someone is not clearly citing their research that we can go check, we don't want to use that as evidence on our show.
It's like everyone's entitled to their opinions, but if you're not making it clear why you're saying what you're saying, then
that's not very helpful.
Anyway, so it was actually kind of hard to find the research to start off with. Like companies like Apple are not citing, why they think this is a good idea to have this,
and they just might say proprietary information or something.
Yeah, and a lot of the times, like newspaper articles that report on this thing, they might say, oh, this study in 1965 by this guy, and then you have to like really work hard to find it. So I was having trouble finding research. But I did make my way to eventually the right search terms, which is really my problem. And that unfortunately opened up just tons and tons of research that I didn't have the time or ability to really evaluate all of it. So we're going to focus on some of the things that I did look at, and just know as you're listening that there's way more research on this than I expected and that we will cover.
Oh, and probably for most every topic that we talk about.
Yeah,
we're not the definitive source.
Since we're not experts, we're just trying to teach each other. Yeah. So the right search terms that I found was desynchronization of circadian rhythms. So that's really the issue at hand here with this blue light thing. Which
I know circadian rhythms is like what makes you go to sleep at night and awake in the day, right?
Right. It's often just referred to as like your body's clock, right? Your it's supposedly what makes you want to go to bed and what makes you want to wake up. And
I think I mentioned it in our space episode in that when in the Mars simulation experiment, when people are not exposed to the regular light dark cycle with the sun, that their body clock is a little bit off.
Right.
It's not like 24 hours, it's more like 25, and people gradually got further and further apart on when they were awake and when they were asleep.
I think that makes sense. So I did see a lot of, although I couldn't find the original study that reported this information, most studies looking into this issue of circadian rhythms being off or desynchronized or whatever found that the average human's cycle of awake and asleep is 24.25 hours. Okay. So a little bit longer than a normal day.
And that's average. Some people are going to be probably more and some less than that.
There was speculation that people that stay up later have a longer cycle, and people that supposedly like go to sleep earlier have a shorter cycle.
I must have a short cycle.
So I'm not sure how much merit there is to that, but that was an interesting point. But I again could not find the actual research that found that. But everyone seems to kind of take it for what it is.
I wonder if it changes. Does it change throughout your life? Because I think some teenagers are known for sleeping more, and then as you get older, you sleep less.
One issue with circadian rhythms
again.
is that there seems to be tons and tons of variables. There was one research article that I read at that was, I think, looking at the difference in age, and they were unsure of whether or not
unclear
based on this one was not one I focused on, so I don't have good information on that. What I do know is that there are tons and tons of variables, including age, season, where you live. It can vary by state, the average length of circadian rhythms, and that probably has to do with latitude and longitude, all that, kind of your position on the earth and how that affects how
much sunlight you are exposed to.
So there's tons and tons of variables, but here's where we are. So right now it seems to be this desynchronization, which, by the way, I should start by saying, what the heck does that even mean? Because I was like, what does desynchronization of circadian rhythms mean? What do you think it means?
Well, synchronized swimming is when you're all doing it exactly together in sync.
Right.
So if you are desynchronized, swimming would just be a bunch of people splashing around and not with any relation to each other.
Okay.
So if your circadian rhythms are desynchronized, then maybe they get not associated with the light and dark, or not.
Yeah, that's perfect, but I had no idea. It basically means they're not well matched with the light-dark cycles of the actual day that you are living in.
What a guess.
Yes. So right now, it's pretty much everyone there's so much evidence that most of the talk now is not about the evidence. It's just about the fact or acceptedness that these light-dark cycles have something to do with your ability to sleep, but also things like developing cancers, diabetes, obesity, depression, a variety of disorders. And so this is where the research is kind of developing at this point. Like, people are fairly certain that there's some type of relationship between circadian rhythms, light-dark cycle, and your health. And we're still kind of discovering what those reasons are and the various types of things that it affects. So let's do the first study that looked at this, that I read about in a couple of more recent studies, but was actually really hard to find itself, was in the 50s.
Oh, wow.
And so it was two guys that were looking at the what they called the rhythm of luminescence in these, like, I could try and pronounce their name, but they were dinoflagellants, which are a type of, like, small sea critter, like super small, like microscopic.
Like a phytoplankton?
Right? Yeah. So these were the first guys to see that, these guys were the first ones to see that there was some type of rhythm that had to do with light and dark. So they were kind of like the first guys to say that there was something called a circadian rhythm. Like
rhythm of how those animals rested and are active? Or?
Yeah, that's pretty much what they were looking at, like photosynthesis and stuff like that. I don't know
if they sleep or...
Yeah, I don't know either. But the kind of area of circadian rhythms in that type of research goes back to the 50s, although most people didn't really think that it existed in humans when these guys first came out with their research.
They didn't notice how humans are asleep and awake?
Well, no, I think it was because of the connection wasn't very clear because of the small microscopic creatures that had photoluminescence. Yeah, I guess they thought we're more
complicated than that. We're not photoluminescing.
Right. So those guys were the first ones to suggest that there was something to do with circadian rhythms and your health and the relationship between light and what your body is doing, kind of. The next interesting part of the research is that for a long time after that, once people started to think that circadian rhythms were something that we should study in humans, the main thing that they thought affected it was social interaction.
So you're not really being very social at night when you're in your bed, So you sleep, and then during the day you're at work and there's lots of people there, so you're awake?
I think so, yeah. That's what they thought the major force was, or the major like factor in circadian rhythms and this like body clock was. That
would imply that you need someone to come in and wake you up. Otherwise, if there was no one coming in to interact with you, you would stay asleep.
I have no idea. So there's a major character in all this circadian research whose name is Dieter Kunz. Dieter, maybe? Yeah, he's from Germany.
Yeah.
So he, at one point or another, was at the Sleep Research and Clinical Chronobiology Research Group.
Where's that?
In Berlin.
Okay.
At a university which sounds very German.
Okay.
So he seems to be this major character, and one of the major studies that he did looking into this blue light thing was that he shined a specific blue light into people were exposed to this blue light at a specific level for 30 minutes right before they were about to go to bed.
So these are human studies, not
right,
rats
human
or mice
studies,
or something
yeah,
like normal.
Yeah, we've moved on. What they looked at was that they shone this particular level of blue light for 30 minutes in someone's house right before they were about to go to bed.
Just all over the house?
I think what happened is they were given the light device that was going to expose them properly to this blue light.
Okay.
And they were told to do it for 30 minutes before they go to bed. And then they were given sensors that could measure whether they were in REM sleep or deep sleep, or which, you can do really easily now with things like Fitbit and other fitness trackers, just based on...
Which is an accelerometer kind of looking at how you're moving?
Yeah. Pretty much. So what they found is that if they did this 30 minutes of the blue light exposure, it delayed the time that someone would get into REM sleep by about 30 minutes.
Did it delay how fast until they actually fell asleep? Or just it took longer to get to REM sleep once they were asleep?
It does not say. Is there a difference between REM sleep? I thought REM sleep was the first one that you entered.
I don't think.
So perhaps this is suggesting that it takes, maybe they still fall asleep as fast, but they don't get, because is REM sleep more rejuvenating?
I think it is more important for kind of setting the brain and storing things in long-term memory and that sort.
So as you can see, this blue light thing... Well, I thought it was just going to be blue light, kind of covers all these different things. There's like the physics of blue light, and then there's like you have to know about sleep, and you have to know about all these other diseases. One of the main interesting things that I read was that this kind of blue light acceptance started with the discovery of a certain type of cell in your eyes. So that's the melanopsin retinal ganglion, which... Okay, so it's a type of nerve cell. And basically what it does is it connects to, from receptors in your eye to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is an area in your brain that is kind of the area that controls the clock, basically. So what I'm trying to say here is these cells connect your eyeball and the receptors there to the area in your brain that controls your internal clock, your kind of awake, asleep clock. Does that make sense?
Okay.
But the interesting part about this is that...
Sort of.
Well, what doesn't make sense?
I guess it makes sense. There's receptors in your eye, which probably are looking at the quality of light around you, and that helps your brain figure out what time it might be.
I guess so, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's just, all I'm saying is that there's a nerve connected between the receptors in your eye and the area of your brain that tells you what time it is.
So they're using the input of like the light around you to help you decide what time it is.
Right. And then the suprachiasmatic nucleus, from what I understand, is responsible for melatonin, which is pretty widely recognized as this sleep hormone at this point, right?
Right. That's something that people take to help with jet lag, I think.
Yeah. So I think the way it works is that higher levels of melatonin in your blood simulate the same thing that would happen if your circadian rhythms were in perfect sync with light-dark. So you increase the level of melatonin, which is what your brain would naturally do if it was dark. and that'll help you sleep better. The interesting part of these nerve cells that go from your eye, though, to the suprachiasmatic nucleus is that only about 40% of them go back to this area of your brain that tells you whether it's night or day. The rest of them go all over your brain to places like brainstem, limbic system, cerebral cortex. So the interesting part is that this kind of amount of light coming into your eyes is that information is being reported to other parts of your brain. And so that's probably where we start to see these light things impact things like depression and obesity and diabetes.
When you say depression, I'm remembering that they have lamps to help with the seasonal affective disorder.
Right, yeah, this is the same thing.
Is it a related thing?
The interesting thing about all of this that I guess I'll bring up now, because you kind of have, is that there's a section of research that is looking at the beneficial effects of blue light. There's also this section of research looking at the negative effects of blue light. And so it's hard to say that blue light is bad or good. It seems to be all in the
circumstance,
the timing. Yeah. So there is research looking at I saw research looking at blue light that is increasing your reaction time and your focus and memory while being exposed to high levels of blue light. And then there's also this other research. Yeah, it gets better. Okay. And then there's other research looking into being exposed to blue light at, I guess what we would say is the wrong time, at nighttime. And then that's not allowing you to sleep as well. What I think is interesting is these are, to me, these are both the same thing. If you sleep better, aren't you going to be more focused and
later on
better the next day? Better. But then they're also shining blue lights on people and making them more focused and have a quicker reaction time.
But it's like it's like caffeine. Maybe if you drink a cup of coffee and have caffeine in the morning, you're going to be more alert. But if you have a cup of coffee before you go to bed, you're not going to sleep very well. It's going to help you or hinder you depending on when you have it.
I guess it could possibly be the same.
I mean, because I'm guilty of being on my computer or my phone before I go to sleep. But I never, and I had heard that you're not supposed to do it for some reason, that you're not going to sleep as well. But I always thought I fall asleep just fine. It doesn't take me a long time to fall asleep. And maybe I'm not entering the REM sleep as quickly as I should be.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So I remember that they did kind of an N of one experiment on Freakonomics radio.
They did a what experiment?
One person.
Oh, N of one.
Yeah. And I don't remember exactly what the show was about, but they had a sleep researcher who was saying, well, you shouldn't use your phones or whatever before you go to bed. And Stephen Dubner was like, all right, well, how about you do it for a week and then come back and tell us how you feel. And she said the same thing, first, I didn't really notice that I didn't sleep very well. I think she had just had a kid, so I think it was hard for her to
Did you talk to me about this before? This sounds familiar.
Well, you probably listened to it.
Oh, no. Okay.
Anyways, I think she had just had a kid, so she was like, well, I don't really know. I'm kind of being woken up by this kid all the time.
I don't sleep well anyway.
But then she said, well, after a week of not using her phone before bed, or if she said she was using her phone when she woke up to take care of her kid in the middle of the night, she said that she did feel way better and more rested after this week of non-use. So I would be interested to know that with me too, because I'm totally guilty of the same thing, TV or computer or phone or all three, right up until the point that I fall asleep. And I honestly notice nothing. I sleep great. I
feel like I sleep fine.
If my alarm doesn't go off, I'm going to keep on sleeping for as long as I want to.
But maybe that's a sign that you didn't sleep. You're not sleeping well.
Maybe it is. We're just showing our ignorance on sleep here. So, yeah, I think but I think the interesting thing about this is that the sleep that you get is probably related more to other parts of your health and not just how you feel about the sleep that you get, right? We know that there's lots of things going on while you're sleeping, and it's probably hard to judge whether how we feel about our sleep is actually, is actually the healthiest or whatever, however you describe it. Okay, a few random facts I think that will be interesting.
Okay.
So remember that I told you earlier that people used to think that it was social interaction that caused the circadian rhythms.
Maybe this is when people lived in large families a lot. I think a lot of people live in small families or alone now than used to, or a lot more than used to. So they didn't factor that in.
So there was the first guy to try and figure out that it was actually light and not social interaction.
It's so obvious to me, though. Like, in the summer when it's late at night, I have a harder time falling asleep than in the winter when it's dark. So obvious, but okay. It's obvious, I guess, after someone has already figured it out.
Yeah, I guess you're right. The first one was by this researcher whose last name is Czeisler.
Try it again.
Everyone has hard names to say.
Try that one more time.
Czeisler? Czeisler.
Czeisler?
The first guy that was trying to prove that this was actually light and not social interaction, he had such a hard time getting his study published because he wasn't controlling for social interaction. So to actually prove that it was light and not people, he had to give all his subjects a controlled amount of social interaction across the whole experiment to prove to the people that were the peer-reviewed researchers
that wasn't the factor.
That it wasn't social interaction. So I thought that was kind of funny because I was in the same boat as you. It's just kind of silly.
Yeah.
But when you haven't done the research, and
I guess they wanted to be sure, which is always good to check.
Another interesting thing that helped to prove it was that they showed there was a difference in people that are blind. They were able to, kind of what the research says is like train the circadian rhythms. Mm-hmm. So make a change in them based on the amount of light that you're giving, exposing the eyes to. Mm-hmm. So they found that people that were blind, you could actually change the circadian rhythms provided that they still had the eyes that they were born with. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So some people, I guess, who are blind have eyes removed. Mm-hmm. And if this were the case...
they had a tumor, for example, and they had to have the eye removed.
Right. So if this is the case, it was impossible to train the circadian rhythms.
There's no receptors at all.
Yeah, and they actually found that the circadian rhythms of all these people without eyes was really hard. There was no average. It was really hard to find some type of pattern between them.
Do people in that circumstance have a hard time going to sleep and waking up?
I don't know, but it would seem like probably yes, and maybe they take some type, but it seems like it would have a major effect. So the interesting thing was that the people who were blind that still had eyes,
whether or not their
brain
function
was perceiving the information, they still could get they could still train the circadian rhythms, meaning that there was still a connection between these specific nerve cells to the area of the brain that controlled the circadian rhythms.
And I mean, I've known people that are blind, like they don't see anything functionally, but they do see like light and dark a little bit or shadows a little bit.
Yeah.
So maybe people in those circumstances can still get input.
Yeah.
They would still be classified as blind, I think, but they can see a little bit of...
There are varying levels of... blindness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the interesting part about this one was that this study too had a lot of trouble getting published, mm-hmm. and that the peer reviewers of this study really didn't want to publish it unless the light was shown over the entire body as a control to prove that it wasn't some other area and not the eyeball that was changing it.
Well, I just think, it's good, though, not to go with expecting that just because the eyes make sense that must be it. It could be a different area of the body.
Right.
And it's good to test.
So as I was doing all this research, I was really realizing we do kind of have this built-in understanding of circadian rhythms that's kind of like popular culture now. It almost seems like
it didn't used to be so obvious.
It was definitely not this way before. I think we can wrap up because I know that I didn't.
What do we know?
I didn't go into any study in depth, but I ended up being overwhelmed by the amount of research in all the different areas that have to do with levels of light and different things. I think from what we know is that there is a definite effect between blue light and there's a particular range of wavelengths that mm-hmm. studies have found that does seem to have an effect on how quickly you can reach REM sleep. So it does seem to have an effect on the type of sleep you can get and the quality of it. And so it seems like something like Apple's night shift software might help. But then again, there's a bunch of other variables.
You are going to be on your phone right before going to sleep,
right?
I guess.
I would actually really like to see research looking at the night shift technology because...
You didn't see any?
No. Well, I mean, and it's new, so the research is going to be, years from now, right? But I did see numbers saying things like, you could give this light exposure, but that most of the light exposure that we gave indoors, and I'm thinking this includes cell phones, is significantly less than the light exposure you would get by going outside on a cloudy day. So I really wonder whether or not, how much change this can make.
And I wonder, is the blue light that you are getting from screens a lot more than you get in other environments? Is there a lot of blue light coming from that?
Well, I think as we've seen with all of these things, timing is important. So maybe even a small amount of blue light at nighttime is enough to...
The night sky is kind of blue. Look up.
I guess so. Okay, that depends on where you are. That was pretty much all that I wanted to focus on with this episode was blue light and sleep, because it all started with why are all these software programs that shift the colors of your screen? So
do you have a takeaway? Should you and I try and report back?
I think you should try it, because the research suggests that yes, there is a connection. It also, as I found, suggests that there's a connection between a ton of other aspects of your health, that those connections haven't been fully formed yet, but that they do, that there is likely some type of connection between obesity, diabetes, and cancers. So
I wonder if it's because your body is just more stressed when you're not sleeping as well, and so you're more prone to developing diseases when your body is more stressed.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, but also that the light, those nerve cells that go from your eyes to parts of your brain don't just go to the circadian rhythms part. They go to other parts of your brain that are regulating other systems.
And we don't know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely partially true. I think all this is interesting. I think what the data shows so far is that there is a connection, but I thought it would be kind of fun if we tried what they did on Freakonomics and reported back next week.
Okay.
To see if there was a change.
Okay.
So we record on Sundays, so it's Sunday now. So I figure for a week we should try and have no screens for half an hour before you go to sleep.
Half hour before going to sleep.
And then we should use the night shift feature on the phones. Just have it on all the time.
Okay.
So that...
I'm going to have to get used to looking at my jaundiced kitty.
Well, supposedly it'll change, right?
Well, I wondered if it's meant to be put on before, 30 minutes before bed.
Well, maybe it never goes all the way blue. Maybe it's more blue in the morning and then less and less and less.
We'll see what it looks like tonight.
So anyways, I think we should try it, and then we'll report back... at the end of next episode to see if there's a change.
Okay.
Sound
see
good?
If I feel well, I'll keep a day-to-day journal. If you enjoyed the episode, please share us with a friend or give us a rating on iTunes. That really helps other people find out about the show.
You can also contact us or leave a comment on Facebook, our Facebook page for Placebo Podcast.
And similarly, you can visit our website, placebopodcast.com, for our show notes, to see all our references or to send us any suggestions or feedback.
Thanks to James Aiken for our music.
And thank you to you for listening. We'll be back with a new episode and report back on our phone experiment next week.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye.